9 years ago, my mother developed a cough, and she went to see her doctors, and all the tests were normal. She went on about her life, and things went on. The cough continued. She had more tests, all of which were negative, and ultimately, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. Never smoked. She had that rare type of lung cancer that faked all of her doctors out. It wasn't the fast kind of cancer, it was that slow kind of cancer where your body slowly shrivels away with chemotherapy. And I'm so thankful for those times that I had with my mother, trying to raise a family and work and go up and spend time with my mother. We had some very precious times. Now, my mother wasn't the kind of person that was on the front row of the church. She was one of those people that did not believe in the old statement, believe and don't ask questions. My mother had a lot of questions. And she was one of those people that was skeptical in many ways. And so, always in the back of my mind, I was always concerned, does my mother really know that she's going to heaven? And of course, we were able to have those conversations again and again, not just about heaven and about eternity and about a relationship with God. We had conversations about all kinds of things, all kinds of little things that she had on her little list that she wanted me to know about before she passed on. But the day came when we put my mother in the grave. And two odd things I remember about that day. Very odd things. As we put her in the grave, the first thing I remember is that there were flowers all over my mother's grave. Now, I want you to understand something. We never gave flowers to my mother. My mother, that's what she did for a living. She made flower arrangements. So the last thing my mother ever wanted was flowers. I know that sounds crazy, but there were flowers all over. And it was a hot summer day. And I remember as we were there at the graveside, another thought crossed my mind. We were standing there in the shade, and I looked up and I saw these beautiful oak trees. Now, I know that's a real odd thing for somebody to notice, but you see, as I as memories began to flood my mind about my mother and about my life as a young boy, I realized that my father and I had planted them. 40 years ago, Russell Eubank, the funeral home owner there in Canton, hired my dad to plant these live oak trees. We planted those trees in the ground. I'll never forget it. My dad would take trees and he would dig them from the ground and put a little burlap sack around them and put them in with the roots, and there they were, and they would grow over time. And as I sat in that shade, I just began to have this assurance that everything was going to be okay. And as I think about that moment, I think about those trees, I think about the fact that assurance is like roots, very similar to the roots of a tree that grow down into the ground and embed themselves in the good soil of God's sovereign goodness. Assurance is like roots. And if you think about this concept is in the Bible. So often we think of assurance as an event. And yes, in one sense it is an event, but it's also a process of growth. As we go through life challenges and circumstances, those roots begin to embed deeper and deeper and deeper into the soil of God's goodness. Think about what it says in Psalm 1. And he shall be like a tree planted by rivers of water that brings forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth will prosper. Think about the parable of the sower. Those four types of seed that the sower just seems to sow haphazardly all over the place, and the different types of soil. There was the hard soil. When the sun came, because it had no root, it died. So many people lack assurance of knowing that they are God's, and that God is theirs. But think about the other soil. There was the rocky soil. We know those challenges and those difficult life experiences came up, and they had shallow roots. And I think assurance is very similar to that in our lives. That the assurance, often we lack assurance when we face trials of all different kinds. And then we think about the thorny soil and how there was competition for the roots, things that were distracting and keeping them from those roots of assurance growing deep in God. But we know that there was also the good soil, and that the roots began to grow into that good soil. Think of what it says in Colossians 2:7. Let me read this to you. It says, "So then, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in Him, rooted and built up, strengthened in faith as you were taught, overflowing with faithfulness." This concept of assurance is all over the Bible. So I think we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to have assurance? You hear a lot of preachers talk about assurance. We sing about blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. What does it mean to have assurance? And I guess I would define it this way. Assurance is a growing confidence and certainty that God is who He says He is, that God has done what He has said He has done, and that God will do what He has said He will do. And that goes on so many levels. So often we need to also realize what assurance is not. Assurance is more than an emotion. It is more than a feeling. It is even deeper than that. Those roots go deeper than emotions and feelings of the moment. It is also something that is based upon fact. It is something that's grown in that good soil by faith. It is also not, assurance is also not the experience of a super saint.